In today's video, we will listen to an everyday conversation between two hosts, Alex and Sarah, about overthinking and how to manage it.
You know that feeling, the one where your brain just gets stuck in a mental treadmill, like replaying some minor conversation you had days ago, or maybe just spinning and spinning on some totally unlikely what-if scenario? It's just exhausting. And here's the real kicker. We often mistake that draining loop for actually productive thinking.
Oh, absolutely. It's the ultimate mental trap, isn't it? You're using up so much cognitive energy, though. It feels like you must be problem solving, but really, you're just burning fuel while completely stuck in neutral.
Right. So the core mission for us in this deep dive really is to give you a kind of blueprint to help you separate that constructive, useful reflection, the kind that actually leads to insight, maybe some action, from that really toxic, unproductive rumination, the kind that just burns energy and honestly makes you feel worse.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack this. We've pulled together a good stack of research for today. We're drawing on strategies straight from CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and also modern mindfulness practices and some really smart tools focused on setting boundaries. This isn't just theory, right? This is meant to be your practical toolkit for actually breaking free from that loop.
Exactly. And to fight it, we first need to, recognize it properly. Overthinking isn't just one single thing. The research we looked at clearly shows it tends to show up in two main, very frustrating cycles that keep people stuck.
Okay, so the first one, that's rumination, right? We often think, replaying a moment helps us learn something. But how do we know when that useful reflection tips over into damaging rumination?
Yeah, that's the key question. It crosses the line when it becomes persistent and really negatively biased. Rumination is basically dwelling on past mistakes or worrying about future scenarios, but always through this negative lens. It's like you're replaying a mental tape, but only the bad parts, over and over. We saw this great example in the source material. A client expressed a pretty minor opinion in a group chat, and then the chat just went quiet for maybe 20 minutes. Total silence. And that ambiguity immediately triggered hours of spinning for them. Oh no, I must have offended them. I sound like an idiot. They probably all think I'm too much, or they hate me now.
Wow, just from silence.
Exactly. A whole sea of fear and negative stories built entirely on, the absence of a quick reply.
It shows how fast the brain can fill that void with worst-case scenarios. That's a perfect illustration. So that's rumination. What's the second loop?
The second major one is analysis paralysis. This is that struggle to make any decision, big or small, because you feel this pressure to weigh every single possible outcome. You keep going until your brain basically just short circuits, overwhelmed.
Okay. And this is where it gets really interesting, I think, as it connects straight into that perfectionism trap we often fall into. Tell us about the maximizers versus the satisficers. This feels like a huge takeaway for anyone who feels constantly stuck making choices.
Yeah, the research on decision-making styles here is fascinating. It identifies these broad types. You've got the maximizers. These are the perfectionists. They feel they must choose the absolute single best option no matter how much effort it takes. They research everything to death. And then you have the satisficers. They look for an option that's good enough, something that meets their core criteria, and then they just choose it and move on.
Okay, my gut is telling me the satisficers end up happier.
You nailed it. Consistently, yes. The research shows satisficers are way less prone to regret later on. Maximizers, on the other hand, spend so much energy searching and comparing, and even after they finally choose something, they're often second-guessing. Did I miss something better? What if...
Right. That constant what if, trying for that 100% certainty or perfection is practically a guarantee you'll get stuck in analysis paralysis. It just doesn't exist most of the time.
So, okay, if we stay stuck in these loops, rumination, analysis, paralysis, what's the actual cost? I mean, beyond just feeling mentally exhausted all the time.
Well, the cost is physiological and it can be really detrimental to your overall health. Chronic overthinking, especially when it's that repetitive negative thinking we see in rumination, significantly ramps up stress hormones like cortisol. And that contributes over time to anxiety, potentially depression, and critically, it really messes with your sleep.
Sleep, yeah, that makes sense, definitely. When you're trying to rest, your brain feels like it's still on, still in problem-solving mode, replaying scenarios, which severely impacts your ability to fall asleep and the quality of deep sleep you get.
So it becomes this vicious cycle, right? Exhaustion fuels more overthinking, which leads to more exhaustion.
Okay, so if the problem is literally the content of our thoughts, these negative loops, then the solution has to involve changing how we perceive and process those thoughts, which takes us right into those brilliant strategies from CBT.
Exactly. We have to talk about cognitive distortions. It sounds technical, but it just means thinking errors. Think of them as these automatic, usually negative mental habits we fall into. They aren't facts, not at all, but they act like putting on a pair of dark-tinted glasses that just color your whole perception of reality. And honestly, the first big step toward changing them is simply becoming aware of them, catching them in the act.
Okay, so let's give people maybe 3 really common distortions to look for so they can catch their brain doing it. What about that big one where like a tiny setback feels like the absolute end of the world?
Right. That's classic catastrophizing. You blow things way, way out of proportion. You automatically jump to the worst possible outcome. For example, you get one piece of critical feedback on a project, and your brain instantly goes, "That's it. My career is over. Total failure." When in reality, it was just, minor feedback. You magnify the negative and completely discount anything that went well.
Yeah, I think we all know that one. What about the mentality where everything is either like a massive success or a total failure? No middle ground.
That's polarized thinking, or sometimes called all or nothing thinking. Life is almost never black and white, right? It's full of grays. But this distortion removes all that nuance. It leaves zero room for mistakes, for learning, for partial success. If it's not absolutely perfect, it's basically garbage in your mind. That sounds exhausting, too.
Okay, and the last one, maybe the one we all do when someone doesn't text back immediately.
Yes, mind reading. We're all guilty of this one sometimes. This is where you just assume you know what other people are thinking. And crucially, that assumption is almost always negative. You create this whole detailed story in your head about how your friend must be mad at you or your boss is surely disappointed, all without a single shred of actual evidence. It's a guaranteed recipe for an anxiety spiral.
Okay, so once we spot these thinking errors happening, what's the practical CBT strategy to actually challenge them? You mentioned cultivating an inner coach to sort of talk back to that inner critic. How do we do that?
Right. The core strategy is called cognitive restructuring. And it's actually pretty straightforward, like having a structured little conversation with yourself. Step 1, just notice the distortion. Catch that inner critic voice saying, "I can't do anything right." Acknowledge it. Step 2, ask yourself, okay, what actual factual evidence supports this thought? Be like a detective here, not a judge. Look for cold, hard facts. And step 3, identify alternative possibilities. What are some more realistic, more balanced potential outcomes or interpretations? The whole goal is to consciously replace that automatic negative assumption with a more grounded, factual perspective. You're essentially turning that unproductive, spinning overthinking into active, useful problem solving, or at least reality testing.
That makes sense. It's like actually redirecting the thought process, which leads perfectly into the action toolkit. Once we kind of know what the problem is cognitively, how do we physically interrupt the cycle? How do we create a barrier against it?
We're on our first tool here. It's about creating a container, using intentional time limits and some clear boundaries.
Yes.
Time limits are fantastic for this. They immediately help reduce that feeling of cognitive overload and sensory overload too for some. For many people, and the research highlights this particularly for neurodivergent individuals, setting these intentional time limits provides almost instant relief, creates a kind of anchor, and it combats that feeling of having like 50 tabs open in your brain at once. And the sources suggest we should match the time frame to the complexity of the decision, right?
So for simple choices, maybe picking a restaurant or something, you'd give yourself like 2 minutes, 3 minutes max, then decide, move on. But for bigger decisions, you might use stage time frames like set a timer for 30 minutes just for research, take a break, then maybe 15 minutes for the final deliberation. The timer becomes your friend, forcing action instead of endless looping.
Spot on. And this pairs really well with the specific CBT technique called worry time. This is great if you're a chronic ruminator. You actually schedule a specific short slot in your day, say 15 minutes at 4 p.m., as your dedicated worry o'clock. Then, if worries pop up at, say, 10 a.m., you literally jot them down quickly and tell your brain, okay, noted, thanks for the input. We'll deal with this during our scheduled worry time. That's how. It sounds simple, maybe even a bit silly, but it brilliantly trains your brain that worries have a specific, confined time and place. It helps you regain control over the rest of your day.
I like that. Containing the worry instead of letting it leak everywhere. So that's managing the external structure. And what about our internal state? How can we use mindfulness and grounding techniques to shift the brain out of that spiral when it's happening?
Right. So neurologically, this is really interesting. Regular mindfulness practice has been shown to reduce activity in what's called the default mode network, or DMN. That DMN is basically your brain's autopilot system. It's the region responsible for mind-wandering, self-referential thought, and, rumination. So when you practice mindfulness, you quiet down the DMN. You get off that autopilot, even briefly, and that brings immediate clarity.
Okay, we've got two great practicals added in the sources here. What's detached mindfulness?
Detached mindfulness is essentially the skill of observing your thoughts without getting swept away by them. Instead of fighting the thought or believing it instantly, you view it more like watching clouds pass in the sky. You might notice the thought, maybe even mentally label it. There's a worry thought about work. And then gently redirect your attention back to the present moment, like your breath or sounds around you. The key is you're reducing your emotional reaction by simply choosing not to engage so deeply with the thought's narrative.
Okay, observing, not absorbing. I like that. What about for like an emergency break, when the spiral feels really intense and you need to snap out of your head right now? We have the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique.
Yes, this is such a practical, powerful tool. It uses your senses to pull you immediately back into your physical reality, grounding you in the present. You just focus on naming, either out loud or in your head, 5 things you can see around you right now, 4 things you can physically touch or feel the sensation of, 3 distinct things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and finally, 1 thing you can taste, even just the lingering taste in your mouth.
Engaging your senses like that activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the calming side, and it acts like hitting the pause button on that mental loop. That's super great. I could see how that would work instantly. Okay, let's move to our final tool segment, the small daily habits. Yes, these seem like simple changes we can weave into our day to conserve mental energy and maybe prevent that decision fatigue that often sparks overthinking in the first place.
Absolutely. And start simple. Movement. Physical activity is a surprisingly effective, fast-acting antidote. Even just a brisk walk around the block can make a huge difference. It anchors your focus back into your body, it changes your brain chemistry slightly, and it shifts your mental state away from that internal chatter. It's about getting out of your head and into your body.
And routines are critical too, right? Limiting decision fatigue by automating the small stuff.
Huge. Every tiny decision we make drains a little bit of cognitive energy. So, automating reoccurring choices, like maybe eating roughly the same healthy breakfast most days, setting a fixed time to check emails instead of constantly reacting, having a regular wind down ritual before bed. These small routines limit the mental load required for minor things, which frees up your precious mental energy for the decisions that actually do matter.
Conserve that bandwidth, and definitely create intentional reset points for your day. Maybe start the morning with just a minute of quiet intention setting before grabbing your phone, which just floods your brain with external stimuli and demands right in an instant. And crucially, end your day with a brain dump. Spend 5 minutes journaling, just getting all the worries, the to-dos, the mental clutter out of your head and onto paper. That simple act of externalizing those thoughts can give your mind permission to actually let go and relax before you try to sleep. Okay, so this has been a really rich deep dive into a whole set of tools for self-management. But we know this journey isn't instantaneous. It takes practice. So stepping back, Sarah, what's the overall mindset shift we should really be aiming for here?
Yeah, that's important. The aim isn't perfection. It's never about eliminating all worry or uncertainty. It's about progress. It's about consistently practicing choosing to move from that stuck analysis mode towards action, even small actions. Every single time you make a small choice to redirect your focus, maybe you challenge a distorted thought, you set that timer, you take that walk outside, you're building mental resilience. You're actively weakening the hold of those old, exhausting thought patterns little by little.
Progress, not perfection. I like that. And that brings up a really key question. When do these self-help strategies maybe indicate it's time to seek professional support? When does it cross that line?
That's a crucial point. If overthinking is causing you significant chronic distress, if it's consistently fueling intense anxiety or low mood, or if it's seriously interfering with your sleep, your relationships, your work, or just your overall ability to function and enjoy life, and this has been going on for a while, that's your signal. Don't hesitate to reach out. Therapies like CBT or another called metacognitive therapy are specifically designed to target and reduce this kind of repetitive negative thinking. A therapist can provide that tailored, expert support you might need to really regain your mental equilibrium.
Okay, good to know. So as we wrap up, here's a final thought for you, the listener, to maybe carry forward today. We're often conditioned to believe that demanding 100% certainty is the safest way to live. And that belief, that's what constantly fuels our need to overthink everything. But what if the deepest, the most truly resilient, and maybe even the most productive choice you can make is actually the practice of accepting uncertainty, reminding yourself intentionally that there are usually multiple acceptable outcomes to most situations and that life very rarely offers absolute guarantees. What kind of freedom might lie in consciously letting go of that need for perfect certainty? Something to think about.
Great work today. Keep going. Every lesson helps you improve your English. I'm excited to see you in the next video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fun lessons. Keep learning and see you again soon.